Congresswoman Hageman, if you would like a privilege of the floor, you're sure mightily welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I did not intend to come here and speak to you today. I was hoping to not be very disruptive, but I was meeting with the Civil Air Patrol downstairs and ran into Mr. Speaker and the President, and they both invited me to come and speak to both bodies. And it is an incredible honor to be here. It's an honor to be here for so many reasons. One is because I love the great state of Wyoming, and I think all of you do just absolutely incredible work. It's also an honor to be here because, as you know, my father was here for 24 years. And so it definitely has a very special place in my heart to be in the well of the House. It's interesting that even though he was here for 24 years, I can probably count on one hand the number of times that I was on the floor down here. So it's nice to come back and have an opportunity to speak. Washington, D.C. right now is incredibly exciting. There is so much going on, as you've seen over the last 2 weeks. To say that the president hit the ground running is really an understatement. But at the same time, the House of Representatives and the Senate, we have an awful lot of work to do as well. We're working on what's called the reconciliation bill, and what that will do is a budget mechanism that we can use that will allow us that we only have to have 50 votes in the Senate for these particular bills. And I have been working with Judiciary as well as Commerce and Energy on issues that are important to the state of Wyoming to make sure that we are protecting our oil and gas industry, our coal industry, our mining industry. I have been working to make sure that the Department of Interior is actually willing to follow things such as FLPMA, the Federal Land Policy Management Act, the Multiple Use Sustained Yield Act, and those sorts of things. This year I have been honored. I have stayed on the same committees as before. I did not want to move. I'm on Judiciary and Natural Resources, which obviously both make a lot of sense for the state of Wyoming. But this year I was honored to be selected as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Water, Wildlife, and Fisheries. So obviously overseeing NEPA reform, Endangered Species Act reform, and then yes. So it will be an exciting 2 years because those are some of the issues that are high on our priority list. I also work very, very closely with the Federal Lands Subcommittee and oftentimes wave on to that committee so that I have the opportunity to question people such as the head of the Forest Service. And then also I'm on energy and minerals because, again, that is so important for the state of Wyoming. You know, I think that we are at the beginning of something incredible in this country, a new turning, if you will, a new awakening in terms of people understanding how bad things can be in terms of looking at the inflation. But now we have an opportunity to actually change things around. And where I often talk about why that's so important and where Wyoming comes into that is we are one of the largest energy producers in the nation. We should be at the forefront of the discussions related to policy in Washington, D.C., because we really are the engine that drive this country. I'm excited about what the president has outlined in terms of his interest in regulatory reform, taking power away from unelected bureaucrats, returning it to the legislative body where it belongs so that those of us who have to be elected or re-elected are actually accountable to the people that we serve. As I said, it's an incredibly exciting time. I'm excited to be involved in it, but I also want to challenge all of you with a couple of things, and that is you need to stay in touch with me. I know that most of the people in this room have my personal cell phone. If you have issues that you think that we need to be addressing, if you want to talk about ways in which I can work with you and work with the state of Wyoming to make sure that I am pushing through legislation back there that helps us here, please get a hold of me. And to the extent that any of your constituents have issues with the IRS or the VA or the Social Security Administration, you can call our office and we will set up a case file and we will help them in any way that we can. We have been able to turn around passports in around 24 to 48 hours in emergency situations. We have been able to recover literally hundreds of thousands of dollars from the IRS that was being wrongfully withheld. In fact, over the last 2 years, we have returned over $4 million to the constituents here in Wyoming that various federal agencies were keeping that belonged here in Wyoming. That's the kind of work we do. And I truly believe that my staff is second to none, both here in Wyoming as well as in Washington, D.C. They love this state. They love working with you. They love working for you. They love what we're doing back there. And again, we have a very open door policy. We want to make sure that we're working on behalf of the citizens of the great state of Wyoming. I know that you have important business ahead of you. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know going through the budget can be long and complicated and all of that, but I know that you guys are all going to make the right decisions. I'm very proud of the work that you're doing. I'm very proud of your dedication to the state of Wyoming, and I'm very proud to serve you. Thank you.
Congresswoman Hageman, it is an honor to have you in the House, and we are so thankful for your representation and your leadership in Washington on behalf of Wyoming. Thank you for giving us your time, and we appreciate all that you do for this great state. And just to demonstrate the amount of courage that this woman demonstrates, she just walked through one of the most infectious group of people, and I think she hugged everybody. So right there is a woman that is fearless. And so thank you very much, Congresswoman Hageman. Thank you for all you do.
Committee of the Whole will come to order. Chairman Bear. Okay. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for an explanation of Section 45. The Department of Transportation can be found on page 8 of your summary sheet or page 28 of your budget bill. And this is a quick little one. The JAC amended footnote number 1 to exempt the appropriation from Section 347 and restored it from Section 307. This is the fourth of 8 of those governor vetoes that we had talked about. Gives more authority to WYDOT to spend funds as needed between like law enforcement and personal expenses through contracted services in the 900 series to meet the Capitol Complex security needs in the most effective and efficient manner determined by the director of the agency. And are there any questions? And seeing none, Madam Chairman, unless there are any further questions, that concludes the explanation of Section 45, the Department of Transportation.
Absent any objection, Section 45 is closed. Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Now on to the Department of Health. This is Agency 48. You can refer to page 9 in your summary sheet and pages 29 and 36 of your budget bill. And I ask for your grace, as this is the first time I have I have presented this agency's budget, so I am learning along with you. But because it is a large agency and one that there are usually a lot of questions around, I just want to give you some context. This agency, 82.5% of this agency's budget is pass-through funds to private and nonprofit providers in our communities to reimburse for necessary medical and long-term care support services that they provide to vulnerable constituents. 10% of the agency's budget pays for healthcare services that are provided directly by our state-operated facilities. So this includes the State Hospital, Veterans Home, Life Resource Center, Pioneer Home, and the Retirement Center. Many of those are in your communities. The remaining 7.5% of the agency's budget is used for administration and regulatory responsibilities. So those are the big buckets. So now on to the request. And I'm going to keep you on your toes to make sure you're paying attention after lunch. Hopefully you guys got a break, but I am aware that I'm standing between you and a long weekend, but this is important work. So what I'm going to do is talk about the request in what we adopted, what we denied, and then what we amended, and dare I say, improved upon. So first to what we adopted. Those recommendations are found in notes, so again, on your legal sheet, notes 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10 are recommendations that we adopted. Note number 3, over concerns that we may lose some home health care providers for high needs children, we approved these rate increases. These rates had not been adjusted in over a decade. Note number 5, we converted 12 part-time positions that are dedicated in the Women, Infant, and Children's Division, 12 part-time to the equivalent of full-time positions, so that the Department of Health can recruit and retain professional staff. It was getting challenging to recruit just part-time, and full-time positions seemed to be more attractive. These funds are paid using 89% of federal funds, 11% of gluten-free funds. Just checking, all right, just making sure you're paying attention. All right, note number 6, so we approved the use of $100,000 in special revenue to make sure that food could be purchased for the cafeteria at the Wyoming Life Resource Center. So this houses individuals with intellectual disabilities and high needs, but the cantina itself serves both the staff, the residents, and visitors of that facility. And then in notes number 8, 9, and 10, this is to allow the agency to right-size their budget and take advantage of an increase in federal grants for senior services, nutritional services, and elder rights. There are no general funds used for these programs, but it reduces the need for the number of B11 requests. All right, so that is what we adopted. Now on to what we decided not to fund, what we denied. So about $2 million increases, or because we denied them, savings, are found in notes 1 and 2. Again, on your summary report, notes 1 and 2. This is regarding maternity care provider reimbursement rates for prenatal, delivery, and postpartum care, and behavioral health provider reimbursement rates for outpatient mental health and substance abuse services. Now on to what we amended. These are found in notes 4, 7, and 11. In note 4, we added $3.86 million in general funds to be matched with $3.86 million in federal funds for home and community-based provider rate increases to maintain services for persons with developmental disabilities. The rate increases were previously paid using ARPA funds, but we know that those funds have run out. So consider this a gap measure in funding until we consider next year's budget bill. Notes number 7 and 10, we reduced 14 vacant positions in the behavioral health unit and agings for a resultant savings of $1.3 million to the general fund. And are there any questions?
Representative Yin.
Madam Chairman, thank you. So for the members of good Committee number 2. So number 1, I think that the footnote number 1 on the status report is the most concerning to me. It was definitely a highlight of the interim Health and Labor Committee that we needed to tackle maternity care in the state, and and it was very apparent that we had a maternity care desert and a lack of OBGYN doctors around the state. Why is that not a priority for JAC?
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Great question. And we have seen this in the news where we have doctors leaving the state. And we had testimony and we have had some testimony, and I anticipate us continuing to look into this during the interim. But we believe that this desert is not a result of lower Medicaid rates, which are already below standard for these services, but rather an issue with insurance that these doctors are paying and finding that it's lower priced, lower cost for your malpractice insurance in other states. So we believe that there's probably something else motivating these OBGYNs leaving our state. And rather than throw more money at a failing program, we felt that it was important to go ahead and look for another solution for that particular issue. This was not it.
Representative Larson. Representative Larson, could you please address the chair?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I can, and I apologize. Madam Chairman, and to the good presenter of the department, well done. You've done that very well. Note 2, if we could, on that. So note 1 and note 2 are really somewhat similar, but note 2 is on the behavioral health redesign, which was being in the process when we had our budget last year. And so that we didn't have the numbers last year and kind of had suggested to the Department of Health or to those behavioral health providers that once we had that rate rebasing that we would consider it. So I'm curious on the conversation you had on why we wouldn't address that at that time. And then 2 more questions that if I may. On the number of employees that you reduced, there's 2 on there, and they've been vacant for a long time, 49 months. They're clinical psychologists. Are we getting rid of them because we don't need them or because they're just so hard to find? I just want to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot by eliminating the position, because I think there is a shortage. And then I'd like to also ask the presenter of the department on the, there was a request made in the budget that the governor denied, so it wouldn't have been in your packet, but last year when we reworked the DD preschools, at the end of the day, we shorted them about $3.2 million. We approved the funding, we just didn't fund it all the way. And as part of a kind of a complex, they had an ECA, they had the shortage of what we shorted them last year. Did you guys go back and consider that even though it wasn't part of the Department of Health's recommendation? So those are my questions, if you could address those, please.
Chairman Bear or Representative Sherwood?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can address that last question. And for those that might want to follow along, in the agency's request, the preschool external cost adjustment shows up on page 46, and you're welcome to look at mine. I have notes all over it. We did have really great testimony around this, and there was a motion brought to put back in the funding, so essentially to go counter to our chief executive's request, but that motion died 6-6. So we did have that discussion, and like I said, I'm happy to share my notes with the body.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My question goes to the footnote 3, or on this summary sheet, the little note, I think we're really calling them notes, note 3, about adopting the governor's recommendations, which I think is wonderful, but it says one time for home health increase. What's the thinking there, as far as, we're going to handle that later in the budget session when it comes up, or one-time increase is great, but it only covers one time, if I understand. Thank you.
Chairman Bear.
First of all, I'd like to go back to the previous asker. There was a question about vacant positions, and the first motivation on our vacant positions had to do with the veto overrides. Last year, we had a request that the executive select 21 different positions, or actually up to 24 positions, for a total of $2.1 million reduction in vacant positions. And we were unable to override that veto, if you will. So we decided to actually work through the vacant positions. We ended up with only 14, I believe it was, total vacant positions, and just did the best we could to select positions that we felt best reflected the previous body's choices, at the same time having the least amount of impact on the department. And then to the last question on number 3, just looking at the governor's recommendation and just going along with him as far as those one-time funds, I do believe that we will revisit all of these requests in the next budget. And when it came to budget footnotes 1 and 2, which were denied, again, we were looking at emergency and unforeseen contingencies. Number 3 is one of those unforeseen contingencies, as well as the number 4, where we added where there was no request. We became aware of that issue and added that even though there was no request there.
Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So again, on these vacant positions, I think we've all seen the news stories about our sheriffs absorbing the costs of inmates who are awaiting transfer to the state hospital for forensic care or evaluation. And I'm wondering, the explanation of why the delays are as extended as they are always come back to staffing. So I wonder if the committee considered the impact of these staffing cuts on these forensic examinations and what that might cost our county sheriffs.
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We did consider many different things, but without that particular information being shared with us, that was not a particular concern that we were looking at the time.
Representative Larson.
Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, I just want to go back. There was one question I asked that I don't think you intentionally missed, but just we overloaded you, and that's note 2 on the behavioral health rebasing, where that wasn't ready for the budget last year. We didn't have that information yet, and that rebasing was completed and was included into this budget. And just wondering what the conversation was, as I'm sure they felt it's emergency, but wondering if there was any conversation, or what that conversation was, please.
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the question. Again, that was the emergency issue. We did not consider those rebasings as an emergency, and we'll revisit them in the regular budget.
Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the good representative who has a really cool dinosaur museum in her community, there you are. Thank you for pointing this out. Note number 3 on page 9, one time, so that is incorrect. That was a typo in the note. Thank you for calling that to our attention. The governor's, our chief executive's request and our agreeance is that these funds would be biennialized. Thank you.
Representative Yen.
Madam Chairman, thank you. So from my understanding, the chief executive didn't put in his request an ECA for the child development centers. Is that something JAC considered at all? It sounds like it was asked already, so my apologies for not paying more attention.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the one presenting this section of the budget, you said in your notes that you have many of them. I'm wondering if in your notes, does the rebasing that was supposed to happen that is not going to happen, do those facilities have enough funding to carry them through that 1-year period?
Representative Sherwood or Chairman Bear?
Thank you for the question. We're going to get with our staff and get back to you on that one, Representative.
Seeing no other questions, Chairman Bear or Representative Sherwood?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. With that, we'll close Section 48 of the budget and move on to Section 49, which is the Department of Family Services.
Absent any objection, Section 48 is closed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for an explanation of this agency 49, please refer to page 10 on your summary sheet and page 36 of your budget bill, which I am also now turning to. On lines 1 and 2, we adopted the chief's recommendations for the just over $500,000, $504,996 for adult protective services. Those are safety net services, and $487,640 for the independent living programs for current and former foster youth. On page 39 of your budget bill, if you'll, and this refers to note 3 in your status report, we added the phrase community crisis centers to the list of group homes and residential treatment centers so that they can receive the same room and board reimbursement rate from the department. The footnote does not increase the original appropriation, but just ensures that these funds can be used only for provider rate reimbursements. And with that, are there any questions? Hearing none, we would close Section 49, Department of Family Services.
Absent any objection, Section 49 is closed. Representative Angelos.
Madam Chairman, for an explanation of Section 57, Community College Commission, you will find it on page 39 of your bill and on page 10 of your status report. You will see that the JAC adopted the governor's recommendation that $390,000 of special revenue for an increase in the Wyoming Public Television Endowment investment income to reduce the number of B11s needed during the biennium. This is interest off their endowment funds, and it goes to the organization that letters are for ponies, bears, and snakes. So I don't know if I could say it, but that's what it goes for. And if there's any questions, I'll stand for any questions. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close out Section 57, the Community College Commission.
Absent any objection, Section 47 is closed.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you. Our next section is Section 60, Page 11, excuse me, on your bill status report, state lands and investments. This is an important one this year with everything we've had go on around our state. Obviously, a record-breaking fire year has depleted our fire suppression accounts, and so this is a direct conversation with that. So, but before I dive into that, going back to the question asked in regards to would we run out of funds in this reevaluation, the answer is no, but we would not be able to pay up to the level that was considered acceptable or ideal. So there is still funding, and they'll be paid at the old funding level, but not at the new assessed funding level. So, so on page 11 in your status report, page 41 in House Bill 1, on the bottom section, number 1, this is JAC adopted the governor's recommendation of $3 million. That's $2.58 million of school foundation program account funds and $420,000 of permanent land funds. This is a one-time payment to pay for estimated state, trust, and property taxes, and added footnote number 2, making the appropriation effective contingent on whether the 2025 Senate File 68 and also 2025 Senate File 81 were enacted into law. So what this means is this goes back to the court hearing that we had this last year that said when we have individuals that are running for a for-profit business on state property, they have to pay taxes. It opened up, I mean, it was a precedented case because it opened a whole bunch of doors that now need to be addressed. And so those two Senate files, Senate File 68 and Senate File 81, are in the pipeline with the intention of trying to address and fix some of these issues. But until then, we are putting a placeholder in there, financial placeholder, to cover up until we have a decision made on that. So line number 2, this is where we get into the acceptance of the governor's recommendation. And the first one on line 2 is $20 million of general funds. This is a one-time appropriations to replenish the emergency fire suppression account. This is to help offset what happened last year. And then the second on line 3, this is to another $20 million of general funds to repay the 2024 Wyoming Sessions Law, Chapter 11, Section 301B, fire borrowing loan account. And so this is just to bring us back into a place where we feel we can do another year in the fire mitigation realm and place. And then honestly, in the general budget or in our budget session, we are going to have a very long look at what this looks like. We have something coming up I'll explain that might help a little bit with what's going on. So line item 4 was the governor's rec of $10 million for an increase in the loan authority and not a new appropriation. JAC adopted a technical correction to reduce the governor's rec of $10 million to 0 because the requirement was not authorized of the loan only, and adopted language to modify the 2024 session law, Chapter 18, Section 301B, to increase the limit to $30,000. So it's a little confusing, but we did what he asked. We gave him $30,000 of loan ability out of the LISRA. What was it? 30 million. Sorry. 30 million. My head's a fishbowl at this point, guys, so bear with me. There's a little difference between 30,000 and 30 million. But $30 million of loan ability, and this is just a language cleanup of a mistake that was found. So when you see that deletion, we didn't delete the actual fund. We just deleted the language and cleaned up the path. Line item 5, this is kind of an exciting one for me. And before I dive into it, I'll give you a story. This will actually be a break from our budget conversation. But right after we had a fire in our neck of the woods that burned a historic mountain and pretty well charred it to nothing. We had a number of our legacy historic ranches taken in this fire, and one of many through the years that we've grown up there. But as this fire went through, we had a new fire marshal that had just taken, county fire marshal had just taken over, and we had a policy that 2,000 acres had to be burned before we would call seats or air support. Well, if you know anything about wildfires, at 2,000 acres in rough terrain, you're way beyond what you can fix. And so we lost a lot of fires, big fires, because of that policy. Well, he said, what if we changed our policy and said this? He goes, I'd rather take the gamble financially, and I would rather run seats and air suppression if it meets a couple criterias. One is rugged terrain, or edge of rugged terrain, or if it's a deal where certain criterias are met in the realm of temperature, wind, and relative humidity. They did that. This last year, if you were to go to Platte County and ask how many fires burned in Platte County, from one of our constituents, they'd probably say maybe 2 or 3. We had a large one that happened in Hartville, the land that has a heart, that burned more than it should, and that was just a bad deal, everything was wrong about that situation. But if you actually asked how many fires, it was 58. 58, and a lot of those were in very rough terrain. So this policy is working, and so line item 5, JAC added $2.75 million of general funds, 1 full-time equivalent FTE position, and 4 PTE, which is seasonal part-times, in addition to a single engine air tanker, or a seat. So when your firefighters call you and say, we called out the seat, that's a single engine air tanker, okay? And this is an opportunity for us to put a second medium-sized seat in Wyoming. We need 1 fire for this to pay for itself. Well, it's going to go on way more than 1 fire. So get ready. I believe this is a policy decision this body's going to have to make in the future as we look at it. The reality is our firefighters are amazing people, but if we look at the cross-section of firefighters, they're getting older. The next generation isn't filling the shoes like they should, and I'll say that about my generation. And the answer is not a 1.5 bouncing across rough terrain anymore. Now, that has its place and will continue to be used, but I think the future of it is this, and so there you got my opinion on top of a little bit of JAC action. So that $2.75 million was not requested. That was an addition we put in with the intention of trying to help an already scary fire season coming up. And then finally, the JAC decreased the governor's recommendation of $20,169,592 general funds one time by $5,196,592. So we came out to $15 million of general funds that went into the MRG, or the Mineral Royalty Grant Program. This was to help shore up that program through the next year. So to give you a bit of an example, last year in the budget, the governor requested $47 million for this. He was granted $27 million. And of that $27 million, we are fully obligated, not fully spent, just fully obligated. So this would give another $15 million to get us between now and next year budget. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I have a question about this seat. Is this, I had heard there was a helicopter. They picked the medium helicopter. There was a small, medium, and large helicopters. I know a lot about them because my whole district burned, and they were all flying over my house, all the different sizes. Or is this some sort of a plane, and where is it going to be stationed?
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So aircraft is loosely used here. So there's dual rotor helicopters and single rotor helicopters. I believe this is going to be it's either 140 or 190 gallon bucket is what this translates out to. And the tentative conversation is to station it up in coal country, so we can service that mountainous region up there on our border with the Faces State, as well as up into the the Bighorns. We can say that, right? Bighorns? Yeah.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to give you a little bit of background on the importance of this, and I do appreciate the good appropriations taking this under their advisement and putting this in our budget. The state forestry, the folks that handle our state forests in Wyoming also have to contract currently when we do our seats. And they actually have to, a year in advance, pick a date that contract begins, and they try to guess when things are going to get so dry that they can actually start to need the planes, and if there's a fire that happens. And actually, in my part of the country here this last summer, we had a fire that started up in that area 2 days before the seats were available to be used. And that fire got enormous. The seats, as soon as they came on, 48 hours after the start of that fire, they knocked that fire down, and they were the difference between making and breaking and going from a couple thousand acres to tens of thousands of acres in my country this last summer. So the ability to be able to have that opportunity whenever that need is met, as opposed to trying to guess by our agencies and to put out those contracts and only those planes are available at that specific time, I think is an incredibly useful and valuable tool in fighting our fires and stopping things as needed, as opposed to we hope we can plan when the fires start because our contracts aren't available till then. So on and for this particular expense.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairwoman. And just to follow up, that actually applies on both ends. This year, we went to October 26th, which is unbelievable that we went that late with them, but we did. I mean, we were putting out fires in the end of October this year. So I definitely think it's a good conversation. And if there is no other questions, Madam Chairwoman, unless there are further questions, I conclude the explanation of Section 60, State Lands and Investments.
Absent any objections, Section 60 is closed. Representative Pendergraph.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. For an explanation of Section 67, the University of Wyoming, refer to page 12 on your SR, page 44 on your bill. The JAC denied the governor's recommendation of $1.5 million general funds one time for the estimated National Collegiate Athletic Association settlement agreement. Essentially, what this means is it's going to cost about $500,000 a year to fight this agreement with the NCAA, and it stems back to the issue of should college football players be able to use their image and likeness and that sort of thing. We looked at this and we kind of dug into when the actual trials were going to be and the timeout, and we felt like 3 years up front was not necessary. In fact, we felt like this was not going to be pressing until we get into the budget next year. And I had a very good, frank conversation with the representative from the University of Wyoming, and I'd like to say that we're developing a very good relationship in being able to speak frankly and honestly. The next item, JAC increased the governor's rec of $500,000 general funds one time by $50,000 general funds to $550,000 to establish a new agreement with the University of Utah School of Medicine for 5 Wyoming students. We send in a program similar to WICHE or WWAMI. We send students to the University of Utah, and they offered us an opportunity to expand the number of students that we could send, and we thought it was pertinent to go ahead and jump on that, especially looking at the staffing issues we have in many medical areas. The next item, JAC adopted the governor's rec of $2,090,000 general funds one time for inflation associated with the coal pyrolysis demonstration project. When I came here, I had about 4 things that I wanted to accomplish. I never saw myself having to study coal pyrolysis and figure out what it was and how it works. But I would encourage you to look into that. We thought it was worthwhile. We want to do everything we can to promote good use of Cole. And so we sustained that ask. The last item, JAC amended footnote 12 to specify that no funds from the state aid and endowments and matching appropriations shall be expended on any diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Folks, we know this goes back and forth, and we know that you have comments, and we look forward to hearing those. I would just ask that we hold those for the second reading of this. A lot of us are tired and not feeling well, and you're free to do what you would like to do, but I would ask that we hold those comments until the second reading. With that, are there any questions?
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got a question on the 1.5 for the athletic, for that lawsuit. It was my understanding that there was a settlement agreed upon and that the judge was supposed to have ruled later last fall, and I heard you say that the trial had not, so is that all changed? And if you just bring me up to speed on that, please.
Thank you,
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Representative Larson. That is a great question. My impression from speaking to them was that there was still going to be a period of time before this was set in stone, before it was settled, and I will certainly go back and reconfirm that.
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I would just add that this is not funding for lawsuits. This is actually a loss of revenue based on the outcome of the lawsuit. So they are asking, the department is asking to cover that loss. And so we felt like they could get by until a decision's been made. We can make a determination if the state should cover that or not.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On number 2, where it talks about the expansion of the medical students program, my question is that paying tuition? Is that just holding a spot? And is that repayable to Wyoming if it is for tuition?
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The answer is yes, that is tuition. And one thing that needs to be added to this conversation is this will be a growing amount of money over time because this is for the first class, the first year of that class. This will continue until that class graduates, but you'll have another class come in. And we are still, at the same time, funding a program out of that university from the northwest part of the state. I'll point out to my colleague from the north part of this state that I finally got the direction right. Northwest, that northwestern state, we have a relationship with them. That's continuing. We'll evaluate this. If this is working out better for the state, we'll probably discontinue that program.
Representative Thayer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a continued question on that new program from the state to the west of us. Will it still, the guidelines is follow WICHES, like 5 years back to the state practicing?
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That is the expectation, is that it would be a similar program where there's a time period where we're anticipating them working within the state, yes. Very similar.
Madam Chair, unless there are further questions, that would conclude the explanation of Section 67 on the University of Wyoming.
Looks like we have one in the back. Representative Yin.
Madam Chair, I apologize if I did miss this, but I wanted to see what are the types of programs that fit in the status report number 4 note. So if UW funded a Black History Month program, does that count or does it not count?
Chairman Bear.
I guess I didn't quite understand the question, so I'm going to have you repeat that, but I'll remind the body that this is language that was struck by the executive in the last budget. So we had this as a footnote that they could not use it for DIE or DEI, thank you. Well, it almost is right, maybe, but no, for DEI programs. And so that we wanted to reinsert where the governor had stricken that.
Additional question, Representative Dean?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, just to repeat that, so the original language footnote said, "No funds from this appropriation shall be expended on the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Wyoming." And then we see the added language, "or on any diversity, equity, and inclusion program, activity, or function." So is a Black History Month celebration one of those?
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for the question. So diversity, equity, inclusion, the issues with the way that this program works is it pits one race against another. So a Black History Month would not qualify as something that is accusing one race of demeaning or treating another wrong and being impugned based on immutable characteristics of that person. So celebrating a particular race, I don't think would qualify for that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, if there are no further questions, that does conclude the explanation of Section 67, the University of Wyoming.
Absent any questions, Section 67 is closed. Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Keeping you guys on your toes here, different mics. This is Agency 77. These are our IT gurus, which means they are much smarter than I am in terms of technology. So for an explanation of the agency, you can refer to page 13 of your summary sheet and page 53 of your budget bill. In note number 1, we denied the request to use general funds for 5 large IP system devices. These will need to be replaced in 2027. Note number 2 is a denial of general funds to support the transition from a third-party vendor who is currently providing digital support services, hosting state agencies' applications and websites, to those digital services being provided internally by ETS's new platform team. Together, these 2 denials total $1.4 million. And then in note number 3, we adopted the recommendation for one-time funds from the agency's internal service funds, so special funds. Those are generated by the agency, and this is to address an unexpected price increase for licensing and support of VMware software. And with that, Madam Chair, I will take questions. Hearing none, I will close agency.
Absent any objections, Section 77 is closed. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for an explanation of Section 80, the Department of Corrections. It can be found on your summary page 13 or in your budget bill, page 54. The JAC basically adopted all of the governor's recommendations, the first of which is $9.3 million of general funds, one time for out-of-state facility inmates that are being housed in another state. The DOC is doing a great job at closing the gap with those vacancies, and they are working hard at getting the inmates back in our state. The JAC also adopted the governor's rec of $454,000 of general funds, which $130,000 of those is a one-time for therapeutic community treatment beds. And lastly, the JAC adopted the governor's recommendation of 1.4 general funds for the adult community correction program. And that last one was just an error. That was a shortfall that was not biennialized in the budget. So it's just making a correction to the budget. Are there any questions? Well, Madam Chair, unless there are further questions, that concludes the explanation of Section 80, Department of Corrections.
Absent any objection, Section 80 is closed. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Flipping over the page one more time for an explanation of Section 85, the Wyoming Business Council can be found on page 14 of your summary report or page 56 of your budget bill. The JAC, this is one agency that had 0 requests. But the JAC decided to take a small portion of the general funds for the Business Ready Communities grant program. And that is only half of the increase since the previous budget. And so we had increased it by 30 million, and we're just taking back part of that to help with the Craig report. So I see questions.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I heard you say a small percent, and then I heard you say 50%. So is it 50 cents and 50%, that totals 14 million, is that right?
Representative Smith or Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So there were 2 instances where JAC determined that we were going to go back into the previous budget and make some reductions. This is the second one. The first one was the Arboretum. This is the second and final one. So the determination was made that the increase in the previous budget was excessive. And so JAC made a determination, and we're recommending that to you, that we reduce that increase in the last budget. But we're halfway through that budget, so we cannot affect the first half of that. So we're only affecting the second half. We really probably could if those funds were not obligated, but to keep it simple and to help the department, we only reduced half. So in their next budget, they will still have an increase, but it'll be half of what we authorized in the previous budget session in the 67th legislature. Hopefully that is a better explanation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Unless there are further questions, that concludes the explanation of Section 85, Wyoming Business Council.
Absent any objection, Section 85 is closed. Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For an explanation of Section 96, the State Budget Department, please refer to page 14 in your status book and page 57 in your budget bill. And folks, this one here, there were no changes. It's just that there was a footnote that was struck by the governor, and we are putting that back in. And this actually just corrects all of the numbering, if you will, in the Section 300. And so this is, I believe, number 4 or 5 of 8. We talked about that earlier, that there's going to be these footnote changes. And this is I think, number 5 of 8. So other than that, there's no changes to this section, to this department. So if there are no questions, Madam Chairman, this concludes Section 96 of the Budget Department, and I would request that we close it.
Absent any objection, Section 96 is closed. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for an explanation of Section 101, the Supreme Court. Please turn to page 14 on your SR and page 58 in your budget book. And if you're going back and looking for a little better explanation of what happened here, there's actually another supplemental budget request, and this comes strictly from the judicial branch because they are an independent branch. We have 3 branches, and they're a different one. So the Supreme Court Justice Fox did submit this, and I had a nice long conversation with her, talked about the history of this. Back in 25, let's see, when was it? 25, 26 appropriation, gave them 3 positions that were agency-wide to be able to handle some of the work around the office there. And it was kind of on a trial basis. We're just going to go ahead and see where we're at for a year. So when the supplemental budget comes, she actually volunteered to cut one of those positions and keep it at 2. And I asked her, why didn't you just ask for 3 and hope for the best? Because you probably would like to have 3. She said, I don't work that way. So I appreciate her candor, and we felt that it was best to sustain the request, the court's request. So JAC adopted the court's request, 2 of them, one for $97,442 from the general fund, and a second for $83,266. And this extends these positions. There's also on page 61, you can look at footnote 8 in your budget bill and get a little bit more definition on that. This time I take any questions. Seeing none, Madam Chair, unless there are no further questions, that would conclude the explanation of Section 101, Supreme Court.
Absent any objection, Section 101 is closed. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next section, Section 157, found on page 15 of your SR, page 62 of the budget bill. This is for the district attorney's office in the center of the state. And they have had an increase of caseload, a substantial increase of caseload. And they have also had a process change, which kind of shortens the time that they have to be able to work through certain things. And this is just, frankly, it's got them in a bit of a bind. We wanted to make sure that the courts worked efficiently and that people got a quick and speedy trial and got to go on through there. So we saw fit to adopt the governor's rec, 3 of them actually, $168,000 and change from the general fund, $115,000 and change. There's also, some of it is just to finish the year and then to start over on the biennial. You can read that in the notes. And number 3, they adopted the governor's rec of $168,252 general fund. These are all similar. We have a couple of attorneys and a legal assistant to help him out. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Madam Chair, unless there are further questions, that concludes the explanation of Section 157, the District Attorney, Judicial District Number 7.
Absent any objection, Section 157 is closed. Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you guys, we're doing great. We're getting through these. You're asking great questions. Kudos, everyone. So this is Section 205, Education School Finance. You can find it on page 15 of your legal size summary sheet and pages 62 and 65 of the budget bill. So within that, there is a narrative on page 63 that outlines how our external cost adjustment funds were allocated in 2024. This includes professional labor, non-professional labor. I hate that term though, because everyone in our school district is profesh. Educational materials and utilities. So that is existing language in the bill. And then you'll see again, the underlined section. So that's new for 2025. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute. But there's a process that we get to in determining our external cost adjustment, or really it's how inflation is impacting how we provide our basket of goods. So this is something that a third party studies and brings recommendation to the Joint Education Committee during the interim. They dig deep in those numbers and then come up with a recommendation. That recommendation is forwarded on to the Joint Appropriations Committee. We dig through the numbers and make a recommendation, and then we bring it to the body. So just a little back history there on that process. We also have to refer to our Superintendent of Public Instruction's letter for school financing regarding the 2025 fiscal year. So in that letter that we received was a recommendation for, and we agreed on 35.5 $35.3 million for K through 12 special education reimbursement obligations. So this means that what we had projected to spend for special education reimbursements was lower than what was actually spent and the actual needs. The other thing that was in that letter that we are recommending and concurring with is $33.9 million for entitlement payments to districts. This number changed based on the Craig report and the decline in property tax revenues that districts experience. So we're making that up here in those entitlement payments. And for an explanation of the ECA that, again, you can find on page 63, 64, and 65 of your budget bill, I'm going to hand it over to our good chairman.
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to walk you through these pages, I'm going to spend time on 64 and 65 of your budget bill, and this is where the real action took place. And we had about 4 or 5 different options that we looked at as your JAC. We picked the second highest. We didn't pick the highest. We picked the second highest increase in our education spending. And so this is detailed in how we broke down this, and this is brought to us by consultants. And so the consultants actually had the lowest that we were willing to go of all those examples that we would choose from. The consultants that we are guided by had about $37 million in increases in spending. And what that will do, folks, we have a gap between the model and where we've been spending. For the last several years, we've just been maintaining that gap. And in this particular budget, this ECA, we are attempting to close that gap. So the 37 million would just maintain the same gap we've been maintaining. 66.3 million would close the gap. And what we chose was 48.8 million. So those numbers, you know, if you feel differently as a body, those are some important numbers. 66.6 closes the gap. 37 just maintains where we've been going for several years. And what we chose was 48.8. And now I'm going to break down how that $48.8 million increase in spending on education comes to us. And the first is on page 64, on line 10, subparagraph Romanet I. And you will see in all of the professional labor, this includes administration and teachers, is an increase of 4.61%, 4.61. And then that number actually came from the consultants. And then on line 16 in Romanet 2, you can see in non-professional labor, we provide for a 5.41% increase in those funds for that particular type of labor. This would be secretarial, janitorial staff. And then Romanet 3, we get to education materials. We have an increase of 1.067% in those materials. And if you'll turn to page 65 on Romanet 4, we have a decrease on energy. We had a very large increase on energy expenditures last ECA, and so this one we're decreasing it, and that is by 6.285%. And then finally, this is where the difference comes between the consultant's recommendation and what we chose. There's an additional 6.78% increase for teaching staff specifically. So in that professional staff, we removed out the administrators, and this is just the classroom. We're giving them an additional raise, and that's the difference between the 37 million and the 48.8 million. With that, we'll stand for questions.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I see the intent. But this goes into the basket of goods where the school board then has, and the administration has, the liberty to use it as they so choose. And so this 6.78 that's identified to the teachers doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go to the teachers, if I understand that correctly. And so I guess my question was, is that the intent? And if so, do we need to tighten that language?
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you for the question. You know, this is a discussion this body really needs to have, because the good bringer of the question is 100% right. We are bound by court cases, court precedent, that we have to create a model, folks, and we have to look at consultants to give us an idea where we should be, and then this body decides, what is that model going to look like? We do that every 5 years in what's called recalibration. We're getting ready to do that this next summer. Big job. We have failed to really get a recalibration across the finish line as far as these bodies for quite some time. We've fallen out of that. But anytime we don't do a recalibration, we have to do this, an ECA, and we need to do this, according to the court outcomes, every year. So you do it every 5 years, you do a recalibration, and then every year in between there, you're doing an external cost adjustment. That's what we're working on right now. The question was, if we make this specific to teachers like we have in this additional, is it just words, or is there something we can do to ensure that when it gets to the district, on the advice of the superintendent, the Board of Trustees has complete latitude? Well, folks, that's really the system we have. Short of changing how we do that funding or putting some new legislation in place that would ensure that the money is colored, we really can't stop them, and especially in a one-year budget bill, from spending this in another way. But yes, it is in the intent of the JAC, and that's what we're recommending to you, that we voice that intent with these lines in the budget, that we intend for the teachers, the classroom, to be where the focus is at. Thank you for the question.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To the committee, sitting through these ECA discussions every year for the past 8 years, the fight, if you will, the argument, the continued pressure on these two bodies, the one here and one down the hall, is always the sustainability. Are we going to sustain this ECA, or is this a one-time ECA? What does this kind of information look like as we're moving forward? Are we planning on keeping this 6.78? And the reason I ask that question is you're exactly right on the fact that we haven't recalibrated since 2005. I personally do like this language. I really, really like this language, because this puts the onus on those trustees and the administrators, for that matter, when they create their budgets and take it to their trustees. Hey, look, the state of Wyoming legislature ponied up and said, we're going to give you guys a 7% raise. If those teachers don't get that 7% raise, they know who they need to go be knocking on those doors for. I really do like this, and I think it's an interesting way to handle the intent of what we are trying to do as a legislature, so I appreciate that. But is this expected to be a continuation? Are we expected to sustain this, or is this a one-time increase?
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excellent question from the Chairman of Transportation. I'll tell you what, we need to be realized that this is a one-year budget, and we're making this increase, and it is ongoing. So an ECA, according to the courts, that this is, you keep adding to it, unless, as you can see in the energy format, you go negative. And in this case, we're positive on each of the different sections of the ECA except for energy. And so this is an ongoing, and then that amount, the dollar amount, will double in your biennium. So in the next biennium, when you look at your education base budget, this will be included, but it will be twice as much. And if you recall my opening statement, when we looked at that long-term forecast, we're several $100 million negative in about 4 years on our long-term forecast on the school foundation program. And that is why we as a HAC and JAC are really focused on trying to find some sustainable funding that stays ahead of that. But great question, and I think it addresses another thing that you need to be aware of. This is why we chose not the maximum amount, which really was the recommendation from the previous JEC. We didn't choose to go with that, which was also from the superintendent. we chose a level lower, and that was to help alleviate some of this doubling when this goes into the budget for a biennium, and that ramp up of the expenditures. So we're trying to close that gap where we're short on the model, while still paying attention to the fact that we've got a real ramp up in our spending, and we are not seeing our revenues do the same thing. Again, that goes back to our discussion yesterday of tightening our belts a little bit for a year or two, and then getting more funding through our investments. So hopefully that and a good economy in the future too.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we've had two models of funding K-12, a legislative model and an evidence-based model. The courts have ruled that we have to comply with the evidence-based model. Up until a few years ago, we funded the legislative model, which was in excess of the evidence-based model. As things have changed and we've elected to fund less of that, the inverse happened. And as we funded the legislative model, it's been less than the evidence-based model, which puts us in conflict with the courts. So the previous JEC made the recommendation to adopt the Joint Education Committee recommendation of the $65 million, which puts us in compliance with the evidence-based model. In this appropriations, joint appropriations, has elected to modify that a little, and that's their prerogative to do. My question, Mr. Chair, is does being outside the courts, are you comfortable? We have a lawsuit and we have a couple other things. Does it give you pause that we're not complying with the court order?
Chairman Bear.
Great question. A lot of these discussions for JAC, this of the 68th and the 67th occurred in executive session, and we're not at liberty to say everything that we heard from our attorneys, but I will say this, that we do need to take lawsuits into account, but I feel like, you know, we're closing that gap in this one, which we haven't done in the last couple of budgets. We haven't done that, so now we're closing the gap. So this, the 68th, if it accepts the recommendation of JAC, will be getting closer to that model, and I think that shows intent to try to close that gap. At the same time, you know, we're getting ready to go into recalibration, and I think there's a good argument to be made that we are getting ready to seriously make a change. Now, if we go into recalibration next summer and we fail to actually get something across the finish line, then that risk of a court case goes up, and that risk of us continuing to have to do ECAs that become unsustainable, as the good chair from transportation said, it increases. So I say that as a preemptive to this body to help you understand that there's a bill that the Management Council just came through with that we approved in appropriations for a committee to do this recalibration this summer. And it's a heavy, heavy lift to get all the training you need to understand the complexities of this work. They're going to work through the summer, but when we come back for our budget session, I don't think there's much more important thing that we need to get accomplished. The good chair of transportation mentioned that it was 2005 was the last time we really passed a recalibration. So that means we've missed 2010, 2015, 2020, 3 calibrations. We didn't get the job done. And I really have a lot of faith in this body to really work together and get something across the finish line that helps our education funding be sustainable and really look out for the future of the state and the education in the state.
Representative Connolly.
Thank you. I just have a question because I don't understand some of this. On the negative 6.285% for the energy category, can you explain a little more to me about what that all entails for our schools, please?
Chairman Bear, Representative
Madam Chairman, could I have the previous speaker repeat the question? Sorry, we were getting some
The
data.
question was about the energy section.
Oh, yes, the negative on the energy section. That's just from our consultants. They looked at the cost of energy and determined that that was appropriate. And so we went with the consultant's recommendation.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you. I almost called you Madam Speaker. That would have been different. Madam Chairman, thank you. Again, to the members of JAC, and this is kind of going back to the discussion on current litigation, sitting out there pending before the courts. I have the concern personally, and I don't disagree that we're making the inching forward on getting us to the right level. My bigger concern is if we don't show the actual, hey, look, if you need to spend 100 million, you need to spend 100 million, but we're going to say, well, we're going to do 97 million this year, then 98 next year, and then 99 the following year. And that just keeps separating just ever so slightly, but we're inching it closer. My concern on that, and this is just coming after 50 years of litigation with this, we're going to get to a point where we're going to lose control over this. And I'm very, very concerned about the potentiality, and this has happened in other states where we actually see a special master appointed, and we lose control over our education side of things. So while I like the understanding of we didn't do the highest end and we think that that might be a defensible stance, I'm concerned that this might put us in that potentiality of we're not doing what was recommended, and this was evidence-based, and this is what the recommendations came from this consultant. Again, I have sat through these, and we haven't done multiple of these ECAs every other year that we're doing them. So that's issue number one. Issue number two that I would say that I'm concerned about, or maybe not necessarily concerned is the right word, I have a little bit of trepidation about is as we're going into this recalibration effort, what is it that we plan on doing for if you say you have big plans and that we're going to see something happen, what does that look like? And maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that, because as we're approaching putting in, $60 million in here for just teacher salaries, I think I have a lot of teachers in my district that are a little worried about what that means when we say we have big plans and what we're going to do. So maybe a little bit of elaboration on that so we can have some understanding, so I can go back to my district tonight and have a message out to them to explain to them what recalibration might look like.
Chairman Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Great question. And all I've stated so far is that I think we need to work harder at getting a final product out. It'll be two things. It'll be that committee's work through the summer that determines what does that look like. I hate to speculate at this point. It's really something that I haven't studied that in depth, but also it'll be this body next year that takes that work and determines what the final product really will be. And we'll be doing that with the advice of that group, which you'll see the bill coming. It's going to be 6 members of this body and 6 members of the other body that makes that determination. You'll have members and probably leadership from the committee that deals with education and this committee here that you see in front of you today. So I don't want to speculate on what the changes would be until we've had time to really study it. And I think it deserves that kind of study. And obviously, it's not an easy thing, or we wouldn't have missed 3 of those getting it done on those 3 previous times. So I appreciate the question, but I think it's a little premature to give an answer to what that looks like. And hopefully we'll get good work done and have an answer next year.
If there are Madam Chairwoman, if there are no other questions, we'll close Agency 205.
Absent any objections, Section 205 is closed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for an explanation of Section 38, the Wyoming Gaming Commission. please turn to page 15 of your summary and page 67 of your budget bill. And this is just reinstating the 6th of 8 executive vetoes in the language. So are there any questions? And unless there are further questions, that concludes the explanation of Section 38, the Wyoming Gaming Commission.
Absent any questions, Section 38 is closed. Chairman Bear.
Madam Chairman, that concludes the goal for today, if you will, and I really appreciate everyone's patience getting to this point. I know some of you are in real misery. We hope that this weekend you'll be able to recover. We also hope that you'll take the information you got today and dig in a little deeper with the materials that we provided you. Our phone numbers are on the website, so if you need to reach out to any of us, please do. We'll be happy to answer your questions. You're welcome to reach out to your constituents and get their input, and then start preparing any changes you'd like to see to this legislation for Monday afternoon. And thank you all.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report. I thought we were going home. Madam Chairwoman, in accordance with Joint Rule 14-1, further Committee of the Whole action will be continued until the next legislative day. Okay, we're going to do this a third time and see if we get it right. I read the wrong thing. Madam Chairwoman, I move that the Committee of the Whole begs leave to rise and sit again. Does that work?
You have heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carried.
In accordance with Joint Rule 14-1, further Committee of the Whole action will be continued until the next legislative day. So, thank you. Thank you. Messages from the Senate.
Message 175. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 5, School District Vehicles, Flashing Lights Authorized. Ayes 30, excused 1. Message 176. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 71, Ignition Interlock Restricted License, Aggravated Homicide. Ayes 28, noes 3. Message 177. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 106, Motor Vehicle Dealer and Manufacturer Warranty Rates. Ayes 25, noes 6. Message 178. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 168, Budget Reserve Account Repeal. Ayes 31. Message 179. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 96, Wyoming Gold Act. Ayes 25, noes 6. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Reading Clerk. Next, we need our reports from our standing committees.
House Bill 183, sponsored by Representative Heiner. Net metering amendments. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 183, net metering amendments, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Schmidt, Tarver, Weber. Excused, Representative Campbell, Reagans. Representative Heiner, Chairman. House Bill 293, sponsored by Representative Baer, repealing the School Foundation Program Reserve Account. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 293, repealing the School Foundation Program Reserve Account. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Baer, Haroldson, Pendergraft, Sherwood, Smith. Excused, Representative Allemand. Representative Baer, Chairman. House Bill 316, sponsored by Management Council, School Finance Model Recalibration 2. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 316, School Finance Model Recalibration 2. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Baer, Haroldson, Pendergraft, Sherwood, Smith. Excused, Representative Allemand. Representative Baer, Chairman.
Thank you, Reading Clerk. Okay, we need our committee announcements. Representative Vice Chair Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 2, Appropriations, will meet Monday, February 3rd, upon noon recess in room E301 upstairs, our usual haunt. We'll be looking at House Bill 292, Budget Reserves Recommended Appropriations Amount, at House Bill 264, Central Bank Digital Currencies Prohibitions, House Bill 165, Ranked Choice Voting Prohibitions, and House Bill 229, High Plains Research Station and Arboretum Historical Site.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pendergraft. Chairman Washut, Judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1 will meet at 8 o'clock on Monday in our usual room to hear 2 bills, House Bill 125 and House Bill 194.
Thank you, Chairman Washut. Chairman Heiner, Minerals.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9 will meet at 8 o'clock on Monday in room 5 to consider 2 bills, House Bill 12, Industrial Production Equipment Deferral, and House Bill 192, Public Utilities Wildfire Mitigation.
Thank you, Chairman Heiner. Chairman Andrew, Education, number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will be Monday upon noon recess in Capitol Extension Room 3 to hear, optimistically, 4 bills. House Bill 180, K through 12 Mental Health Program 3. House Bill 134, Taxpayer Funds Sexually Explicit Venues Prohibited 2. House Bill 171, Sexual Exploitation of Children Amendments. House Bill 225, Mobile Home Certificate Information Disclosure Requirement, as time permits. Thank you.
That is an aggressive itinerary. Representative Knapp, Chairman, Corporations.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Your number 7 corporations will meet Monday upon noon recess for a replay of today, carryover, HB 215, HB 170, and HB 262.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. Chairman Rodriguez-Williams, number 10, Labor Health.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Your committee number 10 will meet Monday at 8 a.m. We will continue to hear House Bill 222, Medical Ethics Defense Act. We will hear House Bill 274, Biological Males in Women's Sports, and House Bill 323, SNAP benefits waiver request as time permits.
Thank you, Chairman Rodriguez-Williams. Any others? Seeing none? Okay, go ahead, Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Please.
Folks, I have this Get Well Soon card for Representative Riggins. If you would like to sign it before you leave for the weekend, please, I'll be standing in the back there. Thank you.
Representative Singh. Yeah, we want to all make every effort to try to get your signature on that to help encourage Representative Riggins. I have a couple announcements just to kind of give you folks some idea where we're at. On Monday, we're going to take care of our second reading bills that we push back a day. The next thing we're going to be working on is we're going to be back on the budget bill in Cal, and then I trust that we will move on to Cal General. That'll be Monday. And then last day for bills to be able to be introduced is Monday. So if I can't get her into a committee or out of my desk, Monday is the last day, and then that will be the end of it for the general session of the 68th. Friday, ladies and gentlemen, of this next week is the last day that your bill can come out of the committee that it started in. So just this next week, that's the end of it. So Chairman, as we work things ahead, I appreciate your diligence in trying to get those pieces of legislation out so that we can get them on a general file, and then our good majority floor leader can do his best work on trying to navigate that and organize it and help each one of you be able to get your legislation hopefully out to the floor here and see it work through the body. So with that, if that clears the deck, Chief Clerk, majority floor leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until Monday, February 3rd at 10 a.m.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. There's fewer no's every day. Adjourn. You can folks go home and have yourself a restful, healing weekend. Vicks and lots of stuff like that. Take care of yourselves. Get energized up. We got a big week next week, so come healthy.